Hello, I'm Keith Johnston from Cultivating Leadership. With the coronavirus outbreak, lots of people are having to work from home and are involved in virtual meetings in ways that they may not have been involved before. And in Cultivating Leadership, because we're a global consultancy, we get to do virtual meetings almost all the time. And so we've got some tips that we thought it would be useful to share at this time in a couple of quick videos. This one is about how you might run virtual meetings and some ideas around that. The other video is about how to deal with complex challenges in meetings and the different ways you might approach that. Because people aren't meeting in person, then there's a couple of things that become difficult. It's harder to sense what's happening for participants and between each other. And it's also harder to kind of write on the walls or draw on the walls or set ideas out in ways that you can see the ideas and also engage and see each other. And as a consequence, it means we need to spend more time bringing people in and connecting with people, and also more time in kind of structuring the ideas. And so we've got these 7 tips, if you like, on how you might approach meetings, virtual meetings, often dealing with complex challenges. The first is to put some attention on what really matters for you. What's the nature of the meeting? It helps to think this through in advance. Is this meeting going to be one where you're genuinely trying to explore issues, or is it one where you're trying to drive in and make decisions? What's your intent in running the meeting? What are the hopes of the participants? And over time, if you're doing these kinds of meetings often, you develop a kind of rhythm where you've worked out what it is that really works when you're actually having a virtual meeting and what they're useful for, and what it is that is best left for other forms of decision making, whether by in different communication channels. But it's also helpful right at the beginning, if you're starting out with virtual meetings, to be clear to people that these are different. Even though we can probably see each other, it's not the same as being in the room together, and it will feel awkward and kind of odd on occasions. Secondly, it really helps to do what you can to help people to be more fully present. They can't be physically present, and as a consequence, it's really hard to read what's going on between people. We don't have all those little cues that we pick up on. And so we need more clearly to bring people into the room, to check in on how they're feeling, and particularly to draw in the quieter people. And related to that, and our third tip is it's very valuable to scan your system and to take action to gather in more perspectives. This particularly applies in complex challenges where there isn't a right answer, and you want the widest range of perspectives possible in order to open up the kind of possibilities for you in taking action. In Cultivating Leadership, we start all of our meetings with what we call a complexity check-in. And what we mean by that is that we ask a question that's related to us coming together, or the context, or the particular issues we're facing, and we then go around the room and hear from every person on that. Now, that can take a long time, can take an hour, or we can be really say, look, we only want to hear 1 word or 3 words or whatever, and we can do it in a few minutes. But even if we do it in a very short amount of time, it still gives us a great deal of value, because what we do, we then go around a second time and we look for patterns. What patterns did we see in what people were saying? What outliers were there? Because outliers are really important in bringing different perspectives. And what did we not hear that seemed relevant to us? You can also do this when you're working through a different topic in a meeting. You can get people to focus in on what's happening for them in relation to this issue, what's their particular experience. Get them to take some moments of silence and make notes. Stopping at that point and getting people to think is really valuable, and then going around and hearing from everybody brings all of the voices into the room, and then you can again look for patterns in what's being said and what's not being said. Our fourth tip is be ready to flex the agenda. you've scanned the system, you've got some ideas of what's going on, you may need to change the agenda around, or an issue might kind of blow up on you and you may need to then focus attention on that. You do that normally in your meetings, but it's particularly important in virtual meetings where you are trying to be more explicit and more structured. And related to that, our fifth point is slow down. Now, obviously, this is a challenge for me because I find it difficult speaking slowly, but it's very valuable to slow down. One, because it's hard to read the room and get a sense of what's going on when people aren't present. And two, because it's hard to have all the ideas up around us and be able to see them, as well as engaging with people, it's hard to hold all those ideas in our heads, and it's quite important to slow down and to be able to spell out what it is that are people meaning here, what are they proposing, what are they responding, and as a consequence of trying to do all that, you need to have a less ambitious agenda because you won't be able to deal as quickly with all of the things you might be able to deal with when you're together in the room. As somebody running one of these meetings, I find it really helpful to try and chair the meeting as openly as possible. And I find that one of the ways I do that is to actually try and be bigger in a virtual meeting, as well as holding my role more lightly. And there's a kind of paradox in that. What I mean by being bigger is I find I need to be more explicit about how I'm thinking about the meeting, or how I'm trying to structure the meeting, whether the topics we're dealing with are in the complicated domain and we want to drive in and make some decisions because there's a right answer to be found, or whether they're in a complex world and there isn't a right answer to be found and we want to be more exploratory and more experimental. It's useful to be able to spell that out. It's useful to be able to summarize what I'm hearing and where I think the meeting has got to, because again, I'm helping people to structure things that we don't all have in front of us. It's also useful to be more propositional, to be able to say, look, I am hearing there are three options here. What do people do or feel in relation to those? Or to be able to say, here's a straw person, and to get people to push against it. And in doing all of that kind of active structuring, it's important to be able to hold that lightly. This isn't me pushing these things. This is a way I'm doing this work, structuring, being bigger in order to help the group to work through the issues rather than to push a particular agenda. Finally, it's really valuable to have backup plans. All meetings are messy, and virtual meetings are particularly messy, and they're often messy because they're virtual. The tech can often be very variable. People are often in noisy circumstances, or they're driving or eating or doing a whole lot of other things. And so it can end up feeling frustrating and feeling disconnected. And so have backup plans for how people can call in if they get disconnected. Get everybody to be on mute and allow time then for people to unmute. Sometimes I signal who I'm going to be calling on in the next couple of rounds, just so that they're kind of ready to be able to be unmute. It makes it a little more formal, but it helps to keep people feeling more connected in the conversation. And there might be people who are meeting in the room as well as people who are online, and in that circumstance, because it's harder to sort of connect in with the people online, it's useful for the people in the room to each buddy up with somebody who's online who can look after that person and kind of draw them in. So there's some tips from us. In summary, you need to be more structured. You've got to work on trying to create connection, particularly in a challenging time like the one we're in now. It helps to be really explicit about how you're trying to run the meeting. And then to be relaxed and flexible and to go with the flow of things. Good luck with all of that. Thanks.